Hello everyone and welcome back to more of the Labyrinth of Grisaia. In the last episode, Yuji had his assassination mission, which he succeeded in doing quite brutally, actually. But we met Asako and JB, and they were good friends and all that, and JB was assigned to the assassination that Yuji pulled off, so, you know, that's how kind of they met, sort of, you know, in a way. But let's continue on with the game, shall we? In the words of Kusakabe Asako, it was something interesting. This is where I left it off. Now, what did we find in, this was when we did the raid at Kiriharu's estate, or Heath Oslo, as he's really come to be known as. He goes by many names. But for a tactician like myself, it was nothing but a headache. In the basement of the mansion Heath Oslo had been using as his base, we discovered an individual suspected of participation in the assassinations I'd been investigating. Specifically, the girl who'd perpetrated the murders in the Gothic Lolita costumes. While that was surprising enough, it also turned out that she was in fact a young boy, not a girl. We dug up something incredibly troublesome this time. I was at my wit's end trying to figure out how to proceed. For the time being, we took our suspected assassin into protective custody and began to interrogate him. The boy's name was Kazami Yuji, occupation student. Once we had that information, it was fairly easy to discover how he'd come in contact with Oslo, and the circumstances that had turned him into the pawn of a terrorist. However, the boy I met in the hospital was in no condition to tell us more. His health had deteriorated severely as a result of spending an extended period of time locked up in underground. And his mental state was also extremely unstable. I don't remember. As a desperate excuse of a criminal, it's something of a cliché. But in Kazami Yuji's case, it was most likely a perfectly honest statement. His memory had been damaged by the experimental doping regimen, unethically administered to him by the research and development side of Oslo's organization. By placing his mind into a clouded state not unlike intoxication, they robbed him of the ability to remember anything except the orders of an absolute authority figure, compelling him to obey. In other words, Oslo had reduced Kazami Yuji to a mechanical killing machine with no free will whatsoever.
家族に対する強いコンプレックスにつけ込んだ洗脳だろうな。あるいは親兄弟の死に関する精神的ダメージを利用した最低の洗脳だ。誰かを殺さなければ代わりに親や兄弟が死ぬ。もしくは親兄弟の敵討ちのために誰かを殺すように仕向けられたか。どちらにしろこんなガキが背負うには重すぎる業だ。洗脳の後遺症で朦朧としてる分、まだ救いがある方だ。
Kazami Yuji remembered quite literally nothing, except his own name. At first, it wasn't clear his memories had been erased by advanced brainwashing techniques or if he was unconsciously sealing off the things he just didn't want to recall. The boy's own behavior soon convinced us it was likely the latter. When discovered during a raid at Heath Oslo's mansion, Kazami Yuji had been bound hand and foot in the basement, his entire body covered in wounds. At the time, we interpreted this as evidence of chronic abuse. But after liberating him, we began to observe fits of violently self-destructive behavior on his part, and realized we'd misunderstood the situation. The boy's mental breakdown was already well underway. He believed that his right hand killed of its own accord, sometimes even against his wishes. Whether friend or foe, he was prone to randomly lash out at anyone who came into his sight. When no target was available, he'd attempted to kill himself instead. It seemed as if someone had ingrained these impulses into his mind. As if that someone was the only person capable of stopping him.
風見雄二について調べてみたわ。間違いなく日本人ね。姉を事故で亡くし、両親も少し特殊なケースで死亡している。孤児になった彼を引き取ったのは香港籍の李レイシュンという男ね。 この男がヒースオスロと何らかのつながりがあったか、もしくはこの男がオスロ当人か。
おそらくそいつに洗脳を受けたんだろうな。標的を親の敵、姉の敵と信じ込まされて戦わされる。周りは全てが敵であり、味方は我々だけだと吹き込む。そして今回、あのガキが唯一の味方と信じていたものを私たちが武力で解体してしまったわけだが、その責任をどう取るつもりだ？
責任も何も日本に送り返して叱るべき施設に入れるだけよ。
今後お前はもう二度と私に向かって無責任だなどという言葉を口にするなよ。お前の方がよっぽど無責任だ。
私にどうしろと？
ガキの頃、最後まで面倒が見れないのなら犬や猫を拾うなと施設のババア先生に言われたのを覚えているか？人間の子供だってそれは同じことだ。面倒を見る気がないなら拾うな。拾ってしまったのなら最後まで面倒を見ろ。
言ってることがむちゃくちゃだわ。
家族もいない、唯一の味方もなくしたあいつに残っているのは自責だけだ。手足を拘束されながらも自傷行動をやめようとしない。今のあいつに必要なのは医者でも薬でもない、あいつの功績を褒めてくれる人間だ。洗脳で暗殺を行うようになったガキに共通するのはいつも同じだ。求めるのはよくやったと褒めてくれる人間。それこそ父親のように常は厳しくも時には自分を認め褒めてくれる人間。頑張ったなと認めてくれる人間が必要なんだ。
それはあなた自身の経験から来る発想でしょ？
ああ、そうだ。ガキのようで申し訳ない話だが、事実私もそんなガキだったし、風見雄二もまた見たままのガキなのだと理解してほしい。
Kazami just needs some of the love, you know.
私に風見雄二の母親になれと？
お前には無理だな。あいつを理解してやるには大人すぎるし、それでいてお前は子供のように残酷だ。
Asako has quite the attitude.
どうしろってのよ。
あいつは日本に送り返すんだろ。私も来月には日本に戻る。ちょうどいい。
ちょっとあなた自分の立場ってものが分かって言ってるの？
何か問題があるのか？
問題があるに決まってるじゃないのよ。
ならその問題を何とかするのがお前の責任だな。まあ。
And so the child we found in the terrace den was repatriated to Japan. And I worked myself half to death getting Kusagabe Asako, who transferred to our Japan branch, registered as his adoptive parent.
で、なんでお前まで日本に来ちゃうんだよ。
仕方がないでしょ。あなたが風見雄二を引き取る上での条件の中に、私があなたたちを監督するって条件がついちゃったんだから、誰のせいだと思ってるのよ。
Alright, calm down, JB.
ああ、そうかい。
そうかいって、それだけ？なんかもっと他に言うことあるんじゃないの？
相変わらずうるせえ女だな。出ちまった結果にいつまでもグダグダ言ってんじゃねえよ。
あんたってばいっつもそう。後先考えずに行動して出ちまった結果に文句を言うなって。面倒が残れば全部私に押し付けて勝手すぎるのよ。もうついていけないわ。
うぜえ。
うぜえって言うな。
That was Kusagabe Asako for you. The woman had always been this way, ever since the day I met her.
おう、昨日入った新入りってのはお前か？心付けはどうした？
On a certain cold November morning, I looked up at a figure perched imposingly on a slide in the orphanage playground. found a small Asian girl looking down at me scornfully, her arms and legs crossed in the pose of a prison gang boss.
心づけ?
It wasn't a phrase I'd heard before. Most likely it was a slang term that I didn't mean much of anything except to the children in this orphanage. But since I'd only just arrived, I didn't have the slightest idea what the girl was talking about.
心づけってのはあれだ。簡単に言えや、貢ぎ物だ。
ないわよ、そんなもの。
I didn't even have a wallet, much less anything I could offer in tribute. I knew some adults would sell their own children for a bit of money, but this was the first time I'd met a child who tried to squeeze cash out of a penniless little girl. Quite the place I'd come to. Even the clothes on my back were on loan from the orphanage. What else could she possibly take from me? I didn't have anything other than my life.
大体、私が何かを持っていたところで、それをあなたに差し出す理由がないわ。
理由がない。理由がないか。確かにないな。だがそれが礼儀ってもんだし、ここで上手に暮らしていくためのルールだと言ったら、どうする？
誰が作ったの？
私だ。私は私の作ったルールにしか従わない。
だったら従わない。従う理由がない。
はあ、生意気な女だ。お前、年いくつよ
？8歳。
タメかよ。
タメ？
同い年って意味だ。そんぐらい知っとけってアホ。
あなたの言葉、方言がきつすぎるわ。
余計なお世話だ。
ちょっと、どこ行くのよ。
てめえは保護観察の天下りババアか？どこへ行こうと私の勝手だ。ついてくんな。
別にあなたに興味はないけど、厄介な女を避けるためにも名前ぐらいは教えていきなさいよ。
Asako。ASAKO でAsako。
私はジュリア。ジュリア・バルデラ。
ブロンド丸出しのダセえ名前だな。ムカつく名前だぜ。
Reminded me of Cowboy Bebop. The blonde woman in that one was named Julia also.
よし JB、 入賞祝いだ。一つだけタダで教えてやる。
JB？
ジュリアなんて名前恥ずかしくて口にできるかよ。なことよりいいか、よく聞け。お前がなんでここに来たかは聞かない。だからお前もくだらねえことは聞くな。それがここのルールだ。わかったか？
聞かれると困る過去でも？
生い立ちを自慢できるようなやつがいると思うか？
Well, she's got a point. As dark as it is.
自由がない上に飯がまずい。真面目なやつほど損をする。ここはそういう場所だ。
つまり、一番上手に生きている人間のそばにいればいいってことよね。
特別にもう一つだけ教えてやる。ここでよろしくやってくルールその2だ。草壁麻子に近寄るなだ。わかったか？私の周りに面倒事を持ち込むな、クソ女。
きっとそれは神の言葉にも匹敵する絶対的な真理ね。
2 days later, I learned from one of the nuns that Kusakabe Asako was the name of the single biggest problem child in that orphanage. Her personality was belligerent, she was cold-hearted and brazen, cunning and quick on her feet. On the whole, she was a nasty little piece of work, and as of my 3rd day there, she was also my roommate, lucky me. Just being around Asako would bring you no end of trouble, so no one was eager to room with her. As the new kid, I naturally ended up getting saddled with that privilege.
Yo, お前ベッドどっちにする?
The room assigned to us was a very small one. More than half of the floor space was occupied by a bunk bed. The walls were bare, undecorated concrete with a single small window for ventilation, and the only source of warmth was an oil heater placed on the floor. Still, as a place to sleep in, it was adequate enough. Not waiting for Asako's reply, I tossed the pair of pajamas I'd been given onto the lower of the 2 beds.
いいのか？ヒーターが近いから暖かいような気がするが。 下段は寒いぞ。
寒いのには慣れてるわ。それに夏は逆に上が暑くて寝られたもんじゃないわよ。
夏になる頃には新入りが増えてまた部屋替えになるさ。まあ好きにしな。
With that, Asako clambered up to the top bunk, threw herself down on it, and didn't say another word. It was like living with a reptile. I didn't have any idea what she was thinking. When told to do something, she'd just gleefully disobey. She broke any rule imposed on her, but stubbornly enforced the ones she made up on her own. The childish obstinance won Asako plenty of enemies, of course. But after some time as the girl's roommate, I began to understand the basic principles behind her behavior. And when I applied that knowledge, I found that it wasn't impossible to control her. Before I knew it, keeping Asako from running wild became my job at the orphanage.
Julia! Julia!
はい、シスター・マーガレット。何かご用でしょうか。
あ、ジュリア。アサコはどこ？
知りません。
知りませんでは困るのよ。あの子また罰当番のトイレ掃除をサボって。
は
あ。ハートは何です、ハートは。あの子の管理はあなたの仕事でしょ？
Actually, I think that would be your job. It would have been a nice retort, but I kept it to myself. My position as Asako's supervisor had gained me some real benefits, so I hardly had the right to complain.
探してきますか？
お願いよ、ジュリア。見つけ出したらすぐに私の部屋に連れてくるように。
わかりました。
At the time, there were a number of factions in the orphanage where we lived, and Asako was constantly in conflict with multiple groups at once. It hardly mattered if she was up against girls or boys, she'd punch them and kick them and leave them all crying. Whenever I got wind of a fight, I'd rush over to intervene. Unfortunately, I usually showed up right after the girl had made her getaway, and just in time for a nun to arrive and punish me in Asako's place.
思い返せば、あなたと出会ってからはそんなことの連続だったわ。腹の立つ。そんな生活が6年も続いて、ようやくあなたの世話から解放されたかと思えば、海軍幼年学校でまたもやばったりと再会。しかも宿舎も同じで部屋も同じ。当時は何かに呪われてるんじゃないかと真剣に悩んだわ。
同じ養護施設から同じ時期に売り飛ばされたんだ。買取先が同じだったところで不思議はなかろう。実際同時期に軍に売られたのは私たち以外にも3人いた。
だから人身売買じゃないって言ってるでしょ。まあ未だに生き残っているのは私とあなただけだけれどね。
そりゃ観光美母試験に受かったお前はまだしも、私らみたいなのはすり減ってなんぼだ。ああも惜しげもなく実戦投入されれば片っ端から死んでくさ。
私がデスク、あなたが実動。お互いの進路も変わって綺麗さっぱり過去を忘れてやり直せる、そんな気概にあふれていたのもわずか2年。作戦部勤務になって情報課の椅子を手に入れたのもつかの間、ケースオフィサーとして初めての作戦に実動として送られてきたのが日下部麻子。それってどういうこと？私はいつまであなたの面倒を見なければいけないの？
言っておくが、私の口からお前の名前を挙げたことは一度もないぞ。上が勝手に決めたことで私に文句を言うな。
分かってるわよ。でもね、今回もまたあなたの言い出したわがままの尻拭いで私まで島流しよ。
いいじゃねえか。軍に残ったところでどうせ出世もできない。ラングレーに飛ばされたところで外様扱いのミソカスで回ってくるのはゴミ処理にも等しい汚れ仕事ばかりだったら、いっそ赤坂でも市ヶ谷でも行って階級を2つばかり上げてもらった方が得じゃないか。
そんなの閉店という名の左遷だわ。
だが給料は上がるぞ。同じ汚れ仕事なら金払いのいいやつに尻尾を振るべきだ。
I can't argue with that one.
私は犬じゃないわ。
そうか。 私は犬だ。犬がいい。
I like Asako. She knows who she is, and she doesn't have any qualms about that.
犬のように生き、犬のように死ぬ。どこかの交差点でぽっくり死んでも、死体は国が始末してくれる。手間がない。最高じゃないか。
いいわよね。あなたは気楽で。
そうか？仕事変わってやろうか。
結構よ。
だよな。っていうか、お前には無理だ。いつまでうなってんだよ。諦めて働け。決め
た！車買う！
That's okay. She's buying a car, alright.
は？なんだ急に。どうした？
何か自分にご褒美あげなきゃやってらんないのよ。買う！高い車！新車で買う！
ああ、まあ好きにしろよ。別に止めやしねえし。
朝子、あなたはもらったお金どうするの？貯金？
いや、実は私はもう買った。
え？もう使っちゃったの？何を買ったのよ？
ふふおめえには秘密だ。
教えなさいよ。法に触れるようなものに手を出したんじゃないでしょうね。お待たせいたしました。風見雄二の退院と引き渡しの手続きが完了しましたので、病室へご案内いたします。おう。おうじゃないでしょ。何を買ったのよ。
Abandoned dogs are abandoned for a variety of reasons. In my case, and Asako's. The reason involved our parents' problems. That's probably the single most typical situation. Some people can't afford to raise their children, Some are inclined to violence and abuse. Some become parents before they're really adults themselves. Situations like that naturally give rise to victims. Kazami Yuji was just another perfectly ordinary case. Another child whose life was disrupted by his family's circumstances. That said, ordinarily we expect that a child who suffered such hardships will be saved once they're over. But the man who took in Yuji after the death of his family was, of all things, an international terrorist. The rate of cruelty of it was unspeakable. Not only had his parents failed him, his foster father had trained him to bite anyone who touched him. A traumatized puppy, tottering down the path to ruin without a hint of doubt in his mind. That was Kazami Yuji in a nutshell. This kid's gonna be a real pain. Looking over the documents we'd put together, Asako had heaved a heavy sigh, and I'd found myself more or less agreeing with her thoughts on the matter. Hospital rooms have a distinctly ominous smell, regardless of what they're used for. In most cases, it's faint enough to be overwhelmed by the scent of chemicals, so you'd barely even notice. But when Asako and I entered Kazami Yuji's room that day, the air was thick with a dark smell, too strong to be erased by that of disinfectant.
少しは顔色が戻ったようだな。
Oh, got some new music playing. I like it. Okay. Kazami Yuji was sitting halfway up in bed, his back against a pillow, an IV connected to his arm. His face was frozen and blank, completely devoid of emotion. He wasn't doing anything other than drawing breath. The boy was, in other words, the very picture of an invalid. At the time of his rescue from Ulso's nest, Yuji's mind had been clouded by the after effects of his brainwashing. He didn't even remember being rescued by Asako. According to the nurse who'd been in charge of him, he wasn't even trying to eat. When they force-fed him, he'd vomit or develop diarrhea. There had been really no choice but to rely on IV feeding and constant medication. Kazami Yuji was thoroughly convinced he had beaten his father to death, and that his mother died because of him. Even quickly looking over the papers, it was obvious he'd gone through more than any child his age was equipped to endure.
こんな子を退院させていいの？
この手の面倒なガキを入れておく病院も稀なら、ベッドの数も多くはねえだろう。さっさと放り出しちまいたいんだろうさ。おい、風見裕二。お前がこの病院にいると邪魔なんだとよ。さっさと出ていくぞ。40秒やる。準備しろ。
そんな言い方。
どうした？聞こえないのか？返事をしろクソガキ。
Did you just hit him?
ちょっと殴らないで。
ん？なんでだ？どうせ誰もいらんガキだろ？なら拾った私のもんだ。捨てる神あれば拾う神ありってな。おいユージ、こっち見ろボケ。私を見るんだ。いいか？私がお前を拾う神、神様だ。わかったか？返事ぐらいしろよ。殴るぞてめえ。
殴りながら言わないでっていうか、ポンポン叩かないで。おもちゃじゃないのよ。どうしてもっと優しくできないの？
バカかお前。こいつは優しくされることに慣れてねえ。自分は優しくされるだけの価値がある人間だと思っちゃいないから、逆に優しくされると敵だと思う。だから手荒く扱ってやった方が手っ取り早いんだ。少なくとも私はそうだった。いいかユージ、所詮この世はクソダメだ。救いなんかない。特にお前のようなやつに手を差し伸べる物好きはいない。善人ぶって近づいてくるやつほどやべえってのはお前自身が嫌ってほど知ってるはずだ。私はお前に優しくなんかしない。お前が一体何の役に立つのだろうとか、何のため、そして何のために今もまだこうして生きているのだろうとか、全部どうでもいい。くだらねえ。ガキがそんなものを考えたところで答えなんざ出るわけがねえ。お前はただ分かったと神である私についてくりゃいいんだ。分かったか？ああ、クソめんどくせえ。いいから来い。お前はもう私のもんだ。逆らうな。
I'm pretty sure Asako was trying to tell the boy to start moving forward instead of worrying endlessly. But some forcible approach just seemed to push Kazami Yuji even further into his shell. Not what we want. The boy wouldn't react even when she thumped him or cursed him. Losing her temper, she practically dragged him out of his hospital bed, then took him straight back to her home. Alrighty guys, I think I'm gonna end the video off here, and let's see what Asako does to Yuji as his new adoptive mother of sorts. Kind of, how's she gonna treat him? Obviously we saw she kind of treated him in the hospital, so maybe treat him like crap, but I don't know. Yuji lost everyone he cared for. You know, even he cared for Oslo to some extent. As dark as the man was, I mean, he needs someone who's going to treat him like a human being, I think, instead of a piece of meat. But, you know, I don't know. Maybe Asako has other plans in store. So, we're going to find out next time on the Labyrinth of Grisaia. Take it easy, everybody.